So this image is by Leisa Miller, and it is of the character Newt Scamander from the new Magical Beasts and Where to Find Them movie. So first off, I want to say great job, just to give you guys some context. Leisa had never really done a lot of digital art before, and so she decided she wanted to learn how to do vector portraits, and she practiced, and I believe she tried it 5 different times before she finally came to this result. So way to take initiative and work hard. I'm going to be doing a paint over. I actually already did the paint over. I'm just going to explain the steps I took and give you my advice and feedback, Alicia. But there's no hard and fast rules in art. These are just my suggestions. Take it or leave it. Do what you want. It's your painting. So to start off, I'm going to move this over here just a little bit. So this is actually Leisha's image, okay? The first thing I did was to darken it up and add some more reds. He was looking a little bit pale in the original image, and there wasn't a ton of contrast. If you squint at it, a lot of the stuff just kind of blended into one color, except for the white of his shirt and the dark blue of his tie, which made it so that was kind of becoming the focal point. So all I did was darken up some areas by using the hue and saturation and brightness sliders on it, and using the color balance. So I added a little bit more red, and then used the curves to increase the darkness, and just give it a little bit more contrast. Okay, so the next thing I did, the background for me was the color just wasn't meshing super well, and it just was not giving the painting, I feel like, a very cohesive feel. So I went ahead and changed it to a neutral color. That way I could work on it and change things and see what I thought looked better. So I changed it to a gray, and then on top of that, on an overlay layer, I created this gradient. Personally, I feel like it gives it way more variation and depth to the painting as well, having that gradient. The next thing I worked on was his face. Now, this is a vector portrait, so it's supposed to have those hard lines. You don't want super smooth blending. It's supposed to look like that. So I tried to keep that style as accurate as possible. So this is my paint over of his face, and I'll go in, we'll zoom up on really close so I can show you the specific parts and what I did to change it. So on his eye right here, let's see. Okay, so on his eye, I noticed that in the reference image that there was a lot more contrast. Okay, so on his left eye, or I guess his right eye, but looking at the image, it's the left one, it got really dark there in that area, but on your painting, it didn't quite get that dark yet. There wasn't that contrast, and so it made his eye look kind of flat and almost look like it was bulging out of his face instead of sinking into his skull. So I went ahead and added some more contrast and really darkened that area up. Okay, and then same with his right eye, I darkened it up, and then on the areas where it was supposed to be light, I made it lighter. Okay, I also tried to capture the light more, and the reason why is because that's what gives the face its form. That's what tells us what shape something is and how big it is and how far it sticks out. And so I tried to capture the light more and really light up that side of his face while pushing the other side of his face further into darkness. Now, this paint job is not beautiful or fantastic. I just tried to do it really roughly and quickly to get the idea across. But if you were painting this yourself, Leisha, you could take the time and effort to really, define it and make it all the lines really crisp and clean instead of kind of jagged like how they are in mine. The other thing I noticed was that his eyebrows were not the right shape or darkness. So that's a really big thing. In the picture, his eyebrows are really raised. He has kind of like a surprised look on his face. And in yours, they seem a little bit low, which gives him kind of like a like unimpressed, kind of like bored feeling almost, or like maybe confused.
Right now,
and so I just raised his eyebrows
yellow
up,
of the
made them
dog
a little bit higher. The one that was in the light,
couch is
making
him look a little green, actually.
And then
so
kind of made
all I
them
have to
a little
do,
bit
as well as a background. So the background, I'm just going to come over here to my hue and saturation after I've selected that layer, and I can slide this around till I get a color that I like better.
Let's go look at his
saturate it,
mouth now,
desaturate it, darken it.
So the next thing was
okay,
get rid of
and
that.
then same with the couch. I can select the couch.
Thing was that his nose
and change
and
that
mouth
however
area.
I need to find a color that I like.
His nose and mouth, with like the nose especially, looked like it was having a little bit of issues in matching his. You could tell it was a nose, but it just didn't have that structure.
That's how I flat
like this is a nose.
In Procreate.
So I went back in and I cleaned that up a little bit.
It's not as convenient as Photoshop,
and once again, just hitting that light source.
Still pretty fast. So
really
hopefully that was helpful for you guys. And if there's anything specific that you'd like to have me do a tutorial on, make sure you put it in the comments, and I'll do my best
so that the nostrils.
Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. Tell your friends about it. And also, I'm having a little bit of a hard time uploading it, but I do have artist interviews coming with people like Sean Keenan, Jake Parker, Will Terry, some really great people. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to see your work critiqued and have it be painted over and put on the channel, so send in your art. The email is in the description as well as the guidelines. So please send that in. And I hope you guys have a great day.
That's what I did for his nose. And then for his mouth, let's see, move this up here. For his mouth, I really tried to match the shape a little bit better. As you can see in the picture, you can't really see his teeth, but I figured that maybe it was just like a stylistic choice, so I tried to respect that a little bit and include that as well. I just made his mouth a little bit more closed, so it wasn't as obvious. And then a big thing that I changed is on the original Leisa, you had it so that there's like this dark ridge under his lip. Almost like he was wearing lip liner, but in real life that just kind of blends into skin. There's not really a defining line except for the physical ridge itself, but there's no it just blends into normal skin, and so I got rid of that. I think that helps a lot, as well as defining kind of the muscles that are around the corners of your mouth. They kind of make a donut shape. He has really prominent ones, and so defining those more and bringing that out in this area. Whoops, that's huge. In this area over here, really trying to capture that shape and nail that. And then, yeah, just narrowing his lips a little bit, because his lips were looking a little plump, and in the reference photo, he has pretty narrow lips. So that's what I did on his mouth. And then that's pretty much all I did for his facial reconstruction. The next thing I went with is his hair. Now, this is totally like a stylistic thing. If you want to go with hair like this because it looks more like graphic and vectory, then go for it. Personally, I like stuff that's a little bit more rendered where you can see the form. So I tried to still keep it using the same colors that are in the original hair palette, but just giving a little bit more form. So when you're working on hair, I recommend looking at it as their own distinct shapes instead of trying to draw each strand. So for example, like this right here is one shape, and this is a shape, this is a shape, so on and so forth, and then lighting each one of those as if they're their own shape. Instead of trying to draw each strand of hair, that can get overwhelming, which sometimes lead us to just make a bunch of swirly marks to represent hair, which in the end doesn't always look very good. So thinking about hair in terms of shapes is really helpful, and really just studying your reference. And once again, I put tried to make a really distinct highlight on the right side and the left side being in shadow, just to give it some more depth and form. Once again, if you were doing this yourself and you're going to take these critiques and run with it, I would recommend using a little bit more precision and taking your time to really make this clean and crisp, but I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it, so I just wanted to get the information across. So the next thing I did was I was still feeling like he was pretty pale, and his skin was feeling really pink, and that he needs some more warmth. So I created an overlay layer and created this dark red, and I don't know if I actually ended up using it. Okay, yeah. So turned up just a little bit. I think it makes it look a little bit more alive. And you could turn it on or off. It's up to you. So I had that, and then on top of that, I made a multiply layer that just really helped to enforce the shadows. I used a desaturated purple to really push the depth around his eye socket on his left side, I guess, right here. I used a little bit of shadow, and then the whole side, this other side of him, I put into shadow. And just to give you an idea so you can see what it looks like, I will turn it back to normal so you can see, and I turn the opacity down. This is what it looks like on normal. On multiply, it just blends it into shadow. So that's what I did for that. The next thing I did was some facial banding. Facial banding is the idea that different parts of your face have slightly different color hues because of the blood vessels there and the pores in your skin and stuff like that. And so I added some of that. Typically, you want to do yellow around the forehead area, and then red across the cheeks and nose because there's a lot of blood pumping through those, and then a blue color around the jaw and mouth area, especially on men because there's usually facial hair pores that are embedded in the skin that give it a slightly blue tone. So I made an overlay layer and I painted that on, and if you could tell, it barely makes a difference, but it brings a ton of life to the painting. So I'll turn it on and off so you can see. That's what it looks like without it, and that's what it looks like with it on. And the opacity on this is pretty low. It's at 35%. But just doing that gives it a little bit more life and depth, and it still keeps its vector look. And then the last thing I did is I really like vector portraits that feel like they have a texture to them or kind of more like a personal flair. So I added a paper texture on overlay, a page out of my sketchbook of some toned paper, and I laid that on overlay and lowered the opacity down to about 38% and left that there. So that's what it looks like without it. That's what it looks like when it's on. It brightens up the whole image. It unifies all the colors by giving it a slightly warm hue to everything. And then it also adds this nice paper texture in the background that I think looks really nice. So take what you want from this and, apply it. I think that your original image looks really good, and these few suggestions could really help take it to the next level. So thanks for sending this in, Leisa. And for everyone else that is watching, just send in your art. The link is in the description to the email address you can send it to, and I will look at it, and if I think that there's a lot of people that would benefit from it, I will go ahead and do a paint over of it and give you a critique and then post it online. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe. Thanks.